capability Al called extended drain interval. However, formidable obstacles remained, including how to formulate a synthetic oil for automobile engines and how to market it. By this time, Al was ready for a new challenge.
He had established himself very well in the military, and he wanted to move on. There was something else calling him.
And he began doing experiments with cold testing in the freezers. He started studying chemistry books and learning about additives, and started formulating products and experimenting on them with some of the people that were in his flying group.
And he says, "Geez, will you put this oil in your car?" I said, "Oh God," I thought, my first brand new car, do I really want to put this oil in there? And I said, "Oh, well, I'll try." And I said, "What the heck? He's my squadron commander. What could I say?" So I put it in my 1966 Ford station wagon. And geez, I'd run it and everything is fine. And he'd call me up. He says, "Get that crap out of there. I got some new stuff."
By 1970, Al had formulated an oil and formed a company. He tried a series of names before finally settling on Amsoil. Al was still flying, but nearly every other moment was consumed with getting his new product off the ground.
When he first started actually making oil, he warehoused it in his garage, and he worked out of his basement. He had a little office in his basement. And his cars were parked out on the street. He used his garage for oil.
He would write his own literature, he would write his own bottles, he would do all of his own artwork and design. He was selling oil out of his trunk.
Well, I think we were partially bankrupt at one time. He just put everything we had into the company and had gone his limit on borrowing. And a lot of people didn't believe in what he was doing. A lot of people refused to borrow him money. And, he was almost living out of his station wagon, selling oil out of the back of the car, trying to make ends meet. That was a tough time.
He struggled.
Al was struggling. He was trying to sell his oil in the conventional manner, but the problem was that it cost 10 times more than the oil that was available at the time, the mineral oil. And you couldn't put it on a shelf because nobody would buy it.
He was being resisted by everybody and everything. The auto industry nobody recognized synthetic oils. The auto industry certainly didn't. They didn't recognize extended drain intervals.
The major oil companies, that's the last thing that they wanted, was a competitor with synthetic oil.
Trying to compete against the major oil companies, that can become a disaster.
It had to be scary because he committed himself to that, and he wasn't in Houston, and he wasn't in any of the so-called oil areas. He was in Duluth, Superior. I didn't really know where Duluth was until the first time I flew in here.
As the stresses and pressures mounted, fate dealt Al a cruel and unforeseen blow.
In the middle of all of this, Al got very, very ill. I don't know that most people would know that, but he was very ill. He had something that could have killed him.
And he called his brother Don, who was a doctor in Minneapolis, and told him his symptoms. And his brother told him, "Will you come down and see me so I can do tests on you?" Al went down there and he tested him, and it was a thyroid condition.
And maybe there were 8 or 10 of us that were aware of these diseases of the thyroid gland in the Twin City area. And I was just fortunate enough to be exposed to it and make that diagnosis.
Don took him through the process of healing again, and he's never had it since. But if it hadn't have been for his brother, he would have died. No one else knew what it was. So that was one of those small miracles, I believe.
With Amsoil proving to be such a hard road, this health scare might have been the final straw, especially for someone with such an enviable career to fall back on. But Al never moved his foot from the pedal. The illness was just another bump in the pavement, and he was determined to find out where this road would take him.
It was Al's optimism in the whole situation that was so important. And really that is a trait of Al that has been critical to his success.
It's a drive from within. There's no other way to explain it. He had a vision. He knew that this product was going to be successful. He had to market it. He had to develop it from scratch. He had to fight all the odds, all the people who said that it wouldn't work.
He was really struggling, but every time you talked to him, he had a success story with his oil. He never complained. He never, it was always positive, always upbeat, always, he really believed in that stuff, and he down deep, he knew it was going to fly. He just had to figure out a way of making it fly.
Al was a pilot, not a businessman, had no formal business training whatsoever. He has a head full of common sense, and so he ran his business with common sense back then, just as he does today.
Al's common sense told him that he needed to prove his oil in the toughest arena he could find. Al enlisted old friend Felix Tomlinson, now living in Southern California, the hotbed of racing development, to help promote his oil. Tomlinson got a sample into the hands of legendary race car builder Dan Gurney and ace mechanic John Miller.
They took a Yamaha motorcycle out one weekend and put it in the motorcycle, and John had one and Dan had the other, and he said Gurney says, "You can't believe it." He says, "I just run away from him. It made all the difference in the world." So they said we stopped, and I changed oil, and we drained both of them, and I put Johnny's oil in my rig and put Amsoil in John's rig, and took off, and John went by me like I was standing still. He says, "I gotta try this stuff in the car."
The lead driver for Gurney's team was racing legend Bobby Unser. For over a decade, Unser had dominated the grueling annual road race up Colorado's Pikes Peak. But Unser was having problems with the gears in his Pikes Peak car. The rear end kept failing after just a single day. In desperation, he contacted Al and begged him for some Amsoil.
So he mailed me some, put it on an airplane. Those days it was an easy thing to do. And I put it in. And lo and behold, my rear end, to show you the difference, would not only last one day, it would last through all the practice session, which was 3 days, qualifying day, which you run further, and race day, and be good for next year. Now, that's the biggest gain I've ever made on a lubricant in my life.
In California, Tomlinson continued working the racing circuit, where Al's new promotional materials were giving Amsoil's credibility another shot in the arm.
I was just thrilled when we finally got a great advertising program and a nice label, and this was the first of the Amsoil labels. Here is some of the first literature. We had some real legitimacy and some nice product presentation. This was a driver that we sponsored and had the Amsoil stickers. And here I am handing him the check in my polyester leisure suit.
Without a doubt, the biggest prize in racing was the Indianapolis 500. And Bobby Unser was one of Indy's shining stars. By now, Unser was a strong believer in Al's product and a close friend, but the big oil companies had a lock on his sponsorship. That didn't keep Unser from doing what was needed to win.
So I'd carry the oil in, and I'd just set it in the garage along on the floor so everybody would see it. If it be a 5-gallon can, it'd be a 5-gallon can. If it be in quarts, it'd be in quarts. It'd all say Valvoline on it, or whoever was doing it in those days. and inside would be Amsoil.
Bobby Hunter has won the Indianapolis 500.
Al had finally managed to move the business out of his home. His new quarters were in Superior, Wisconsin, just across the St. Louis Bay from his old Raleigh Street neighborhood.
What he started with was a little dinky building, and he started blending oil over there.
And he also had his first office was there, and it was inside the brick building, and it was very, very austere. Really nothing, an old desk.
I remember his first addie machine. He said, "Look at this addie machine." And I says, "Al," I said, "you know that those old addie machines don't even subtract?" He says, "I don't want anything to subtract."
Al's optimism never wavered. No matter how small, austere, or outdated, he counted each step forward as a success. This included his acquisition of a brutish vehicle he affectionately dubbed Big Red.
Big Red is Al's first semi-truck that he would haul oil with. It's a Mack truck, and it has no air conditioning. It has no power steering. He refers to it as a man killer.
This is a big truck with a big steering, no power steering. I mean, this truck is not easy to drive.
Turn. Can you imagine driving a semi without power steering? I mean, it's impossible.
And I think to him, it's a symbol of his success and how he struggled. That truck was there from the beginning, and it's still there, and he holds it dear to his heart.
To successfully market a motor oil, there are two sets of 3 letters that mean more than all the racing testimonials on Earth. API is the acronym for the American Petroleum Institute. SAE stands for the Society of Automotive Engineers. These letters can only be applied to products officially certified through rigorous testing to have met or exceeded the performance standards of these official agencies. In 1972, Amsoil became the first 100% synthetic motor oil to earn these qualifications.
When you build an engine oil, you must meet all the criteria that has been put out by the Society of Automotive Engineers, American Petroleum Institute. Your product has to meet all of the criteria.
The happiest day for me was when Al spent the money, and he spent a lot of money to go down to San Antonio and get the SAE rating on Amsoil. And that was, to me, was when it became really no longer a research project, but you had a product on the market, and it was off and running.
And yet, even with the legitimacy afforded by the official certifications, Al wasn't pulling any punches. His label trumpeted Amsoil's extended drain interval, the recommendation